Okay, welcome, Alyssa, to your first YouTube interview. Do you want to tell the people watching a little bit about yourself or you jump into the questions?
My name's Alyssa. I'm currently an M1 at UIC College of Medicine. I'm originally from Chicago, south side of Chicago. And yeah, I'm excited to be here.
Hey, okay, so number one question, when and how did you know you wanted to become a doctor?
So I can't remember exactly which grade it was, but it was in middle school. I think it was maybe like fifth or sixth grade, and we were learning about sex. And so, along with like the sex talk, they told us about like how babies are made. And I just remember being so interested in that. I'm like, okay, so maybe I want to be a doctor. So then after that, I saw a 2020 special of Ben Carson. And I don't agree with anything else he does, but that 2020 special, he was separating conjoined twins. And I just remember being so interested in it. And from there, I just knew I wanted to be in medicine.
Wonderful. I also can't remember like the specific time that I knew, but it's just something that I always was like, what else am I going to do with my life
And
besides
it's
this?
crazy. Like from there, I just didn't really consider anything else. And I feel like I hear a lot of people, like our classmates or just friends that are also in medical school, say that they knew like pretty early on. And so, yeah.
I think that's cool. Okay, so now walk me through your journey to medical school. I will also share mine, and I don't think I've ever talked about like the full journey to medical school on my channel before. So I think this will be fun to talk about. So you first.
Girl, it was twists and turns. Okay, it was not a straight path.
Me too.
So I went to school, to college in Boston, and I did 4 years there. I majored in biology. Well, I first went in thinking that I wanted to do biochemistry because it sounded impressive. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna get a degree in biochemistry. Then I was struggling in my intro, my what's it called, general chemistry class. So I'm like, okay, I cannot do another 3 years of this. And I just, throughout that whole 4 years of college, I just struggled so much academically. And it was really shocking to me because in high school, I didn't really have any troubles. I was a high achieving student. And so going into college, I'm like, okay, this is gonna be a breeze. Like I'm gonna do fine. And it was not at all. So I struggled in not just chemistry, but like all my introductory science courses. And from there, I just struggled each year, because a lot of those classes, if you don't have the foundations, then you're not going to do well in other courses. So at the end of my 4 years there, I'm like, okay, so I am now like 95% sure that I want to be a doctor when I used to be 100% sure. And from there, I'm like, well, I know that I can't go to medical school right away. And then also, I didn't really get much like pre-health advising at my school. And so I didn't even really know the process of getting into medical school. I knew that you have to take an MCAT and your grades have to be good, but I didn't really know much else besides that. So I left college with my confidence like down there. So after that, I did a year as a research assistant in Boston at Brigham and Women's. And I flew home one weekend for something, I don't remember, but I ran into a friend from high school and she was telling me how she was starting a post-bac program down in Carbondale, Illinois. And so I'm like, okay, post-bac. She kind of explained what that was because I didn't know what that was. And after I went back to Boston, I started researching and I'm like, okay, I need to do something that's going to help not just prepare me for the MCAT, but give me a grade booster because my GPA was low. So I applied to that program. I got in, and then I did 2 years at a post-bac program down in Southern Illinois. And there it was like a whole 180. Like going into college, I was 18, I probably wasn't the most disciplined student. And then on top of that, I didn't get much advising. So when I was entering this post-bac program at 22, 23, I'm like, all right, I don't have any more time to waste. if I am in this program for 2 years and I don't get the results that I want, I'm going to feel even more lost than I did when I first graduated. So I really buckled down. I got great advising there, great mentorship, and I took the MCAT. I did well, and now I'm here at UIC.
Okay. So also, what year did you graduate from
I
undergrad?
graduated in 2017.
Okay, so I graduated in 2016. I went to school in Iowa, a really small liberal arts school called Grinnell College. And same, like general chemistry killed me. I didn't know what
Girl.
I was doing. The labs were so hard. And they told us that, like, they purposely make the classes really hard so they can be like weed out classes. But it's just like, how hard can it really be? Because like, none of the Black students at my college were passing. So I'm like, it must have been like we weren't prepared. I don't know what that was about. Like, a lot of Black kids came in, they were pre-med, wanted to be doctors, and by their second or third year, they were like English or history majors. And I'm like, what is like
Yeah,
what's going on?
sociology, something else. Yeah.
Yeah, it was like not
Yep.
what they wanted, but just like something that worked because what they actually wanted didn't work out. So that was really frustrating. So I kept going, and then I decided to major in psychology because like I did well and I actually liked it. So I'm like, okay, let me just do the pre-med classes on the side, but like be a psych major. And then after my second year, I was like, medical school is not really looking so great. So I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna be a psych. I'm gonna just do psych. And then I told my mom, and she's like, so what are you gonna do with it? I was like, I'm gonna go to grad school and I'm become a psychologist. And she was just like, girl, no, that is not gonna work. That's not a reasonable option. Like, just forget about it. So I'm like, whatever. Like, I'm like, she don't know what she's talking about. So I keep going. I finish with my psych degree. I don't take organic chemistry. I don't take biochemistry. Like, I literally just was like, whatever. I decided, I think it was at the beginning of my spring semester, junior year, that I really was like, okay, this is just not going to be for me. Because I decided to go study abroad my first semester of senior year, which means like I definitely couldn't do organic chemistry. So I went abroad, and while I was studying abroad, for whatever reason, it just came back over me like, you can still do this. So I'm like, okay, I have never heard of a post-bac. I don't even know how I found out. I was just Googling one day and I was like, oh, okay, I'm going to apply to here and here. And I applied to these random schools and I got in at Northwestern and I was planning on going there. And then one day, like a month before I graduated, I happened to be looking in the junk mail in my Gmail folder, and I saw that I got into Wash U, which is the place that I wanted to go. But it was like months ago. And I was like, how did I miss this email? So I reached out to them, like got everything together, and then I went to Wash U. I did the research assistant thing just like you. I did it in the child psychiatry lab at Wash U. So this was 2016 to 2018. And I actually registered for the MCAT in fall 2017 to take it at the end of my post-bac. And then time's going on, I'm taking organic chemistry 1 and 2. And for whatever reason, I'm just like, well, if I'm taking the classes, I'm going to be ready for the MCAT. Like I didn't study, I didn't do anything. So that test day was approaching and I was like, girl, you are not ready for this MCAT. But it was so late that I was beyond the refund. So all the money was gone. So I'm like, okay, let's try again next year. So of course, because I didn't take it that year, that pushes back the cycle a whole year, which was so defeating. And you know how like family members would be like, oh, like, what do you have going on? How's medical school? All that stuff. And I'm just like, they don't understand.
And you can't be like, oh, well, I'm in a post-bac, or you getting a degree. At least mine,
Yeah.
I didn't get it.
Me
So I
either.
would just
They're
be
like,
like,
what
grad
degree are you
school.
getting? Same, literally same. So yeah, I did my postbac because it got pushed back a year. I spent the entire next year studying for the MCAT, and me and my boyfriend just randomly moved to LA. Like my mom was probably like, "What is this girl doing?" With her life. So I moved to LA, and I spend the whole year self-studying. Like I could not afford those prep courses or whatever, so I just got the Kaplan books, like tested myself every weekend, and just went with that. So I finally took it. Well, I finally went to take it in April 2019. I can't believe that was 2 years ago almost. Anyway, April 2019, I went to take it. We get there, the computers in all of California crash. So I'm sitting, like, you know how nerve-wracking it is taking the MCAT. So I'm sitting there like, okay, you got this. We're gonna get it over with. And then they're like, hey, it's 2 hours that goes by. Like after 2 hours, we legally can't keep you all here anymore. So you're gonna have to go home and we'll reach out. I was like, you are like, I was just waiting for the punk cameras to come out because like there is no way that I have been preparing for this for years. So they finally reach out. I had to reschedule. I was in LA. I had to reschedule. There were no more test dates in LA. There was only one available in Chicago for June 1st. So I had to fly back home to Chicago, take the MCAT, finally got it over with, and I did well. You took yours,
yeah, that was
yeah, so
but I wasn't in Chicago, I was in Carbondale. Yeah.
Oh, got you. So yeah, I came back, took it, got that done with, and then I just spent wait, so when did I even apply? Yeah, so that summer is when I applied. So like right after I got my score, and I was also worried because like the way the timeline works, like you're supposed to have your scores by June 1st.
Be able to submit as soon as the application opens, and I didn't do that either. I'm like a master procrastinator, so I will procrastinate anything. It doesn't matter how important. So
like
I like ready to submit either.
Yeah. So I was planning to be ready because if the April test date worked out, I would have had my score and been able to submit. But because that didn't happen, I'm like, if this ruins my chances of getting into medical school, like I don't know what I'm gonna do. So I apply to, I don't even know how many schools I applied to, but it was expensive. Like that's the thing no one talks about. Like it's expensive. And I was looking at Reddit threads and people were applying to like 30 schools. I'm like, where are you getting? Because it's what, like 100 for every school that you add?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was crazy. So I only applied to a few schools. Fast forward, I'm here at UIC, and like, I still can't believe sometimes, like, you know how you get so caught up in the schoolwork and it's like, oh, this is so hard. But then you're like, it's been years. Like, I've been trying to get here for so long. So, very happy.
I just think about it. We knew that we would be doctors, like we said, when we were really young. So, like, from then all the way up until now, like, that's how long it took to get here. And you're right. Like, sometimes I don't think about it either. And then, like, so our first day was on my 25th birthday. And, you know, parents, their Facebooks, like if they post you, I love reading the comments because it hypes me. So I went to my mom's comment section because she had posted a picture of me in my white coat. And I'm scrolling and I see like one of her friends comment like, oh my God, I remember in 2008 when she came to DC, you guys came to DC for the inauguration. And she talked about how much she wanted to be a doctor. And I'm just like,
wow. That's
wow. So I had a little tear because it's been a long time coming.
Girl, like that's crazy. It's still like such a long journey from this point, but it's just like getting here is like the bulk of it. Like it just takes so much to get right here.
Now like, unless something very tragic or, just life altering happens, that you're going to be a doctor at this point. And I feel like that's what pre-meds just strive to get to, that point where it's like, okay, well, I'm safe.
Yep.
Yep. And we had a lot of like similarities between our undergrad experiences because, like you said, my school was just like that. I felt like a lot of the Black kids were weeded out, or if they were struggling, people weren't like, oh, let me help you. It's just like, okay, one less person.
I think I actually wrote about that either in my primary or my secondary application, just like about like getting to the root of that. And then when I did my interview, I was interviewed by Pamela, I can't remember her last name, but she went to Grinnell. Yeah. And she saw what I had written and asked me about it, like as one of the what's it called? Like the quick interviews. How could I forget?
MMI.
Yes, the MMI. And I also talk about that. And yeah, I was just saying like, there's no way that there's something wrong with every single Black kid, that we just can't get it. Like there's clearly like some type of gap at the beginning that the schools didn't care to fill. And so, yeah, but that's story for another day. But yes, I'm so glad that we both made it here. So the next question is, what were some of the biggest obstacles you had to overcome on your journey?
Well, like all 4 years of undergrad, but I think that like the biggest obstacle that those 4 years kind of like accumulated into was my confidence. Like I was not confident in myself at the end of 4 years. At the end of my time in college, I really was like, okay, I must be dumb. I'm not as smart as I think I am. I don't think that I'm gonna be a good doctor because, I couldn't even do well in general chemistry. Like, how do you not do well in general chemistry? But like the post-bac program that I did really did help to like boost my confidence because I saw myself succeeding and I'm like, okay, so it wasn't an issue. I mean, obviously there were issues with me, like I did not know how to study effectively, but it wasn't issues in terms of you can't get the content. It's about someone being able to water and pour into you. So I think my biggest obstacle was definitely self-confidence.
It's just a real like shock to the system when you've gone your whole life being the smart kid and you get there and you're like, wait, have I just been like tricked this whole time? Like,
Yeah,
am
like,
I
were
not?
they lying to me?
Yeah.
Like my mom's just like, oh, you're so smart, but I'm really not. Like, what's happening? So
Yeah,
that's,
I
yeah.
had the same experience. Okay, and next question. Now that we have a full semester under our belts, how do your expectations of what medical school would be like compared to what it actually has been for the past, what, like 4 or 5 months?
Um, hmm. I think that I always heard from people who were in medical school, like it's like drinking water from what is it, a
A
fire
fire
hose?
hose, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm like, oh my God, like I'm not ready for this. But honestly, like, yes, that's true. You get a whole bunch of information at once. It's doable. And I wish like someone had just told me that too, because that would have cut down a lot of like my anxiety towards med school was that you're going to get a whole bunch of information, but you kind of have to come to the realization that you're not going to get everything like on the first try. You're not going, everything that we learn in the 5 weeks in a block, you're not going to remember every single little line that they tell you. So, like, trying to master the high yield content is definitely something that now that I'm looking back, I'm like, okay, this is different from what I thought because I mean, again, in undergrad, I was used to you would come in for a test and you get like those little trick questions, like they're intentionally trying to trip you up. And I can say that our testing and our quizzes, for the most part, are pretty fair. So that's something that I didn't expect from med school.
I think the best advice that I got the summer before, because I did SPP,
Mhm.
one of the M2s, he came to one of our sessions and he was like, get comfortable with not knowing everything.
Yeah.
Because up until that point, we kind of had to know everything, like to get here. But now it's like we're at a whole other level where it's impossible. Because when you specialize, you don't have to know everything. You just have to know everything about your specialty. Whereas medical school is learning everything about everything, which is really, really overwhelming. And so once I got like comfortable with being like, okay, what can I pull out of this? And whatever else I can't get, just try to understand it at the very least. Like even if you can't memorize it, just try to understand it.
Yeah, like
So
what are the things that when you go into this test or when you're going into step, like you have to know these things. And then what are some of the things where it's like, okay, that could help me with like 1 or 2 points, but it's not going to make or break me.
yeah, understandable. Next question. Has your identity as a Black woman entering the medical field negatively impacted your experiences at all?
I think that they haven't negatively impacted my experiences in terms of like I'm just always confronting blatant racism. I mean, definitely we live in like a racist society, so I can't sit up here and be like, no, like everything's fine. Like I'm pretty sure that even some of my struggles in undergrad were connected to professors and counselors not really taking me seriously and wanting to go into STEM. I remember one of the pre-health advisors at my college was like, maybe you should just consider public health. You know, I don't think that medicine is for you. Do I think that she told Susan and Sally that? No, probably not. So, I mean, I think it's definitely impacted me in that way. And then, of course, like microaggressions that I deal with even now with our class. But I also think that it gives me an advantage. Like it gives me a viewpoint that a lot of people who aren't Black women or don't come from marginalized communities, they don't get that perspective of how the world really works. So, you know, there's negatives, but there's a whole bunch of benefits.
I remember one time talking to my advisor in my postbac, which is one of the differences between our experiences, is that my advisor was basically non-existent, and I didn't talk to him until it was time to apply to medical school. So I
Even
called
in your
him.
post-bac?
What'd you say?
Even in your post-bac,
In
you're
my
talking about,
postbac.
oh,
Yeah.
wow.
So in my undergrad, my advisor was also not very helpful.
Yeah.
She really did not give me any advice about medical school. She probably did take me seriously, like you said. But I thought it would be different in the advising with my postbac. It just so happened that they had good like resources within the curriculum that I was able to lean on that Grinnell didn't have. But when I called him to go over my prerequisites, and basically we were supposed to get approval from them to go ahead and do our applications, and we were supposed to get a committee letter. So I called him and I'm like, hey, just making sure everything's all good. And he had never even looked at my file. He was like, yeah, let me pull your file up and see, like, he was like, yeah, I'm not sure if you're ready to apply yet. And I'm like, okay, cool. And at that moment, I was like, I'm not getting a committee letter. I'm going to get a letter from my boss at the medical school because I'm just not setting myself up for failure, because if I'm talking to you and you're telling me I'm not ready, you're not going to write me a good letter. So that's when I just like disown myself from him. But other than that, I feel like any impacts of my identity as a Black woman have been like internal or implicit. Like it'll be like looking in class and seeing a whole bunch of non-Black faces and then feeling like extremely insecure or like imposter syndrome, like
Especially
just,
our class size, like we have a huge class. And so
yeah.
that's a whole bunch more white faces that you see on the daily. And you're just like, all right,
Yeah,
where do
it
I put
just,
myself in these people?
yeah, it gets to you when you just are able to look at it like so macro and just like see just the lack, and that sucks. But I think both of us being in UMed is like us doing our part to
Yeah.
just do something to help with that. Next question. Other than the virtual format due to COVID-19, what's one thing you wish you could change about your medical experience this far?
So yeah, I think it's kind of hard for me to answer that because I think that a lot of the challenges that I've had so far have been related to being virtual and being in a pandemic and being in the middle of, you know, civil unrest. All those factors have kind of like made it so hard to just be able to be a student, which is what everyone kind of advises you to do when you're going into your first few years of medical school. Like, you're not going to have time to see your family all the time. You're not going to have time to do this. You just have to focus on being a student. But when I'm seeing, you know, all this stuff all the time on Instagram or Twitter, it's kind of hard to just stay in that study bubble. So I think that, you know, on top of the pandemic, just the state that our country is in has been like really hard for me to deal with while in medical school. But I also think that something outside of that that I would like to change about my medical education would be just the speed at which we go sometimes. Like, why why do we have to rush? Can we slow down a little bit? You know, like sometimes I feel like I'm just learning all this information, doing all these Anki cards, you know, doing these practice questions, and then after the block, there's obviously things that I still remember, but I just wish I had time to really like sit with the information, get more interested in the information, because when we go so fast, it is hard to maintain my interest.
I definitely agree. The pace is unrealistic sometimes. Like this block, the anatomy, like it's just so much. But then I got a little bit thrown off because during SPP, like being able to label what was really important. Whereas now it seems like it's more like the pathological features, like what can go wrong, the exceptions. So I'm having to kind of tweak how I'm studying. And I've been tweaking how I'm studying, I feel like every week since school has started.
Every block, yeah. It's so like, and you're right, I said every block, but it really is every week because every week is like, especially in block one and block two, it's like something completely different. I'm like, okay, wait, how do I study for this? Okay, wait, how do I study for this? And
Hmm.
so that's also something I wish just maybe like, I don't know the word, maybe continuity a little bit. Like, even though the blocks do have themes, sometimes it just feels like we're all over the place. And
Yeah.
especially the block we're in now, musculoskeletal, it's not the fact that it's even that much information per se, as it is just we're stuffing it into 5 weeks. Like if it had been even 6 weeks, I think that it would have been a little bit more manageable. So that's something I wish I could change, but I feel like they have it timed that way for a reason. I just don't know the reason.
Yeah. And that's the thing, like on one hand, you like want to complain and be like, oh, this is so hard, this is so much. But it's also like the people who created this system know exactly what they're doing. And like I think they create it in such a way that we're gonna keep seeing stuff come back over and over. Like we've been seeing things these past 2 weeks that we learned like block one, block two. So it's nice to like get that refresher. But something that I wish I could change is like my own mindset from the beginning, because I would just get so anxious and like so tense and so worked up. And it's like, yes, it's difficult. Yes, it's going to be a challenge every week. But like, does worrying about it really make anything any better? No. So it's like, I just make my to do list. I work in 45-minute blocks, do what I can do. And like, whatever I can't get to or like just can't figure out in this moment, it's cool because like there's more time. Like we have a week of studying at the end before our final exam. So this block is, I'm taking it so much like more easy on myself, like just like mentally, like not doing less work, but just not associating the workload with stress, if that makes sense.
I definitely agree. You know what? That's a good answer to mindset because I like, so block one wasn't that difficult for me. Um, and I think it's because I was just coming out of my post back and it was a lot of the stuff that I had just learned. So I'm like, okay, that's cool. But after that, I'm like, oh my God, I've never seen this before. Like, what is this? What is that? How do I look at pathology? Like, what is this? So I kind of like beat myself up mentally if I wasn't getting something, especially because it's so easy to compare yourself to other people in your class. Like, even when you're doing group work, if they explain something one way, you're like, oh man, I should have said it like that. I should have thought about it like that. And so just like having grace with myself and then also instituting like a schedule, which is something that I still don't do. Like I'm a really bad planner. So like I think you mentioned before too, outside of like this video that you work in 45-minute blocks. I'm like, wow, I really wish I had like started doing something like that because people have been telling me to do that for a while and I
Mhm.
just don't do it. And
Yeah.
so yeah, I think I need to be more like open to changing things if they don't work.
Yeah, and it took me a while. I didn't start these blocks until the end of block two because I would just study and study and study, and then I would get so like worked up, and
Mhm.
I'm like, why am I just trying to go 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 without taking a break? Like that's just not helpful for anyone. And
Right.
so,
Like, of course, I'm not going to be focused if I've been studying for 2 hours. Like,
right.
yeah, I don't want to get on my phone.
Yeah, so this actually leads perfectly into the next question, which is what have you found to be the most effective study regimen for yourself?
So I think that, like, with stuff that was more just pure memorization, like all the bugs that we learned, all the bacteria and stuff, I really leaned heavily on Anki. But now it's like, okay, you don't need to just memorize, you have to kind of like understand and comprehend. So what I do is before each day, the prep work, I'll watch a Boards and Beyond video that corresponds to that. And then I'll just type out my notes and create like a study guide for myself based off of that. And then the practice questions at the end of the Boards and Beyond video, I'll do that just so that I kind of like hammer in those points. And even if I get the question right, I make sure to read their explanation below for why it was right. And then after I've gone to the lecture, I make sure to go to lectures in person because knowing myself, if I don't go right then and there, I'm not going to watch the lecture. So I go to lecture and I'll type in my study guide, things that they've said supplemental to what I already have in there. And then after class, I'll do the associated Anki cards with them. So like block one and block two, especially block one, I would do like 800 Anki cards a night. I struggle to get through 100 to 200 now. I can't do it. And it's because it takes more time for me to be like, okay, wait, why is it that answer again? You know, like I'm just trying to break myself out of rote memorization. And so the study habits that have really worked for me have been like analyzing why something is the way it is.
I am anti Anki, and it's taking me a long time to just come out and say that because every couple weeks I'll see something in the group me or like in my TBR. They're like, "Yeah, I learned that on an Anki card," and I'm like, "Okay, maybe I need to go back and do Anki," but I know deep down that Anki just doesn't work for me. Well, not that it doesn't work, but because there's so many cards in a deck, I feel like I'm never going to get all the information that I need. So like I don't like seeing it in that way. But I feel like the study method that I use is so chaotic that there has to be a better way. So because okay, so say for example, our anatomy lectures. So I will do the pre-class slides, like I'll watch the Atlas videos where he like goes
Yeah.
through muscle by muscle. Then I'll go through the tables and I'll write it out. Like I'll either type it out on my computer or write it out. I actually like writing it out better, but it takes so long sometimes that like but I also like the pretty colors and like color coordinating my notes. Like I love that. So I do that and then we'll go to lecture and I'm like, okay, so I don't memorize it when I take my notes, but I like make sure that I am highlighting like what's the differences and I'm doing it enough to where like I have a good idea. And then during lecture, I'm listening and kind of like predicting what she's gonna say, like, oh yeah, this muscle does this. So then I'm like updating my notes. And then I make a point to after the lecture review the entire lecture all over again. So it's like a 3-pass system of everything, which is pretty time consuming sometimes, but I feel like it really allows me to like
Yeah.
get the first introduction, get a deeper introduction, and then like really like embed.
You're telling me like, oh, I've seen, like, I make sure that I see each thing like at least 3 times. I'm like, oh, that's a good idea. Let me start doing
Yeah.
that because I would like, I would do the prep work and make study guides. And then after, I wouldn't like, after class, I wouldn't revisit that study guide until, you know, later, maybe a week or something later. Like, that's not helpful for me. I have to see that information again now that I've heard her voice or his voice, like, okay, so this is this. And that 3-pass thing really does help.
Like I cannot tell you how many times I've gone to a lecture and then reviewed it that night and like have seen stuff that I don't even remember seeing in lecture because it's like you're
Yeah.
trying to listen and write and read the slides. It's so much going on that like you almost need to go back and just like look it over at a slower pace. I also find it helpful in the lectures that are flipped classroom. Like I won't put the answer on the slide, but when I go back over it later, I'll answer the questions and then check it against the faculty slides to make sure that I really understand it. So that's my study method. It's a little chaotic, but it's been working so far. Next question, almost at the end. What would you like to accomplish as a physician 10 years from now?
So I've always said that I want to have like my own clinic on the south side of Chicago, like deep on the south side in the area where, you know, it's not easily accessible. You can't easily access University of Chicago, which is like the main hospital down here on the south side. So I've always wanted to open my own clinic. And recently I've kind of realized that um, I, so I'm interested in public health and I want to get my master's in public health. Um, but I've realized that I'm interested in like the policy side of it because, okay, we've done the research. We know that these health disparities exist, you know, now what are we going to do about it? And I think that focusing on policy would help to really see change in my community. And then besides that, I just want to be a physician that patients really trust to get good information and then also to get good care. Like, if anything has taught us that we need more trustworthy physicians, it's definitely been this pandemic. Like, just listening to family members and friends anecdotally on their hesitancy for the vaccine and kind of just like, okay, you can say that you're going to wait and not get the vaccine, but what are you going to like, where are you going to get the information from while you're waiting? So I want to be that type of physician where they could be like, oh, Dr. Lawrence, like, can you tell me about what an mRNA vaccine is? What does it do? And that they trust that I'm giving them the real, I'm not leading them down, you know, a straight path.
Dr. Lawrence sounds so good. Love that. Okay, next question. If you could go back and give your undergraduate self some advice, what would it be?
I'd be like, girl, just close the textbook, go to sleep. No, but for real, because I would like stress myself out. I'd be in our library was 24 hours, and I would be in the library like until ungodly hours, just trying to absorb all the information. And it just, there was no point. Not only was I tired, but I was still like not getting what I needed to get. So I definitely would have told myself, like, just close the book, relax. Like, this is not a successful study method. I would have told myself to find a way to study that really works for you. And then I also would have told myself to like stick my neck out more because I think that through my academic struggles in college, like I said, it kind of like tore down my self-confidence. So then I wasn't really confident reaching out to physicians or just mentors in general to be like, oh, I need some advice on this, or oh, can I shadow you? And, you know, I think that one thing about medicine is that the people in medicine are, for the most part, they really want to help you and they really are like excited when they see people that are interested in medicine. So I would have told myself to like stick my neck out more and just, you know, ask to do research, ask to shadow this physician. Like, what's the worst that they can say? No, like, don't be afraid of the no. And then I also would have just told myself to like give myself a little bit more grace. Like, you aren't going to solve all your problems in one day. So there's no point of constantly beating yourself up or, you know, negative self-talk. So that's also something I would have told my college self.
Sticking my neck out is something that was unheard of to me in undergrad. Like, I was so just afraid of everything. And I also, like, looking back on it, realized that I had some like extreme social anxiety going on. And so,
Me
like, a
too.
combination of like, I didn't even speak up in class. I
Me neither.
literally did not speak in
I
class
still
because
don't speak up in class. So
it takes, when I talk in class now, I probably need no less than 5 minutes to like mentally go over what I'm going
yeah.
to, like, it's very, but in undergrad it was even worse. Like, I wouldn't even go to some events because I'm just like, I cannot tolerate this right now. But so that definitely impacted like how outgoing I was and what I got involved in. Like, I basically had no clinical experience in undergrad, which I was really nervous about applying because I'm like, if they don't see that I was like shadowing and all this stuff, like they're not gonna think, you know, but here we are.
But
Oh
that
yeah.
also with age too. Like, if you think about it, when you're in college, you're what, 18 to 21, 22. Like, you learn so much more about like life in the world in
Mhm.
those years in between college and now. And
Literally.
I'm definitely like way more confident in myself. And then also like I still do kind of have social anxiety, but it's definitely subsided to where like now I don't think I would be afraid, like, oh, can I shadow you? Oh, do you have like research positions? Because I think also the thing with medicine is when you're in pre-med, it seems like there's a lot of gatekeeping that's involved in like getting into medical school and just like getting into the medical profession. Like I always felt like, okay, well, if I don't have good grades, then why would they want me to, assist them in their lab? Like they have me in their class, they know that I'm not good enough. Or, oh, if I'm not doing well, then why do I need to be shadowing? I need to be studying. And it's just like, once you get into medical school, you kind of see just how much people want to help you.
Our last question, what advice would you give to someone else who is currently in the application process or wants to go to medical school?
I would definitely say to like believe in yourself, like believe in yourself, believe in yourself. Most of the people that I've met like throughout my journey to medicine that have done well or successfully matriculated into medical school, they're not baby Einsteins. And I'm not saying that to be mean, but I'm just saying that I feel like everyone has the capability to do medicine. I don't think that it's something that's just like, oh my God, it's so difficult that no one can comprehend the body. Like you can do it. It's all about having confidence in yourself, learning how to study, and then, finding good mentors. And so I would also say to not be afraid to ask people for help, because that was something that I struggled with throughout my journey, was asking for help because I thought it made me weak or I was afraid of someone saying no. But looking back, I really wish that I had had a mentor or an advisor or something that could have helped me along the way and, like maybe lessened my burden. So I would say that. And I would also just say, don't be discouraged if, you're not successful on your first time or if you have stumbling blocks. It's very seldom that I've met anybody who hasn't had a roadblock in their journey to medicine. And so, if you fall, pick yourself back up, dust yourself off, take a few minutes to be like, oh man, I can't believe, and then just keep going because, feeling sorry for yourself isn't going to get you to medical school. You have to like really be diligent and really just trust that you're meant to be in this profession, which I think, if anyone is interested in it, they can do it.
I would say definitely to trust the process. I found a lot during my application process that I was just questioning, like, why? Like, just being so annoyed. Like, is this really necessary? Is this really going to matter? Studying for the MCAT. I'm like, this is so unrealistic. But now I feel like I take the MCAT every block exam. Like, it literally, the types of questions, the way, like, all of that stuff really matters. So I would just tell someone to just take it seriously. Like as you're going along, it's challenging because it has to be. If it wasn't challenging, everybody would be doing it. So it has to be challenging. But once you accept that, just embrace the challenge and be like, okay, cool, like I'm ready to go. And also, I think just being confident that what is meant to happen, there is nothing that you can do to get in the way of it as long as you take care of your business. Like as long as you're doing the classes, you're doing the schoolwork, you're studying, you're getting the service, like doing all the things that you know are necessary. If that's in place, then there's nothing else to worry about because the process is there. Like it's just the next step is getting in. So I definitely want my channel to be a place where people can come and like if they are wanting to go to medical school and just wondering like what's it like, I always want to give a very realistic view. Like I'm not going to sit up here and be like, this is the best week. I learned everything. Like I've passed all the quizzes.
I understand everything about
Yeah.
arthritis. Like I know all this stuff. And yeah, like I sit here and I do 1,000 Anki cards and I wake up at 5 and I study it. No, girl, I be struggling to wake up at 8. Okay. Yeah, I think it's definitely good that you have this channel to give people the real. Like, I wish that this had been around when I was applying or like even before that when I was in college, because I never even really knew that there's this whole side of the internet that was like med Twitter or med Instagram. And like, it's just really inspiring to see Black women in medicine. So good job.
Thank you. Okay, well, that's all the question that I have. I'm sure you have something to be doing right now. I definitely have something I should be doing. So thank you for taking some time out of your day to talk with me. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. This was fun.